What happens when we take square roots of parabolas? The same steps are there. We look, is our graph ever equal to 0? Yes. Here and here. Is our graph have y values that are ever equal to 1? Yes. We can't label those points. All right. So we had, where were we? We had already looked at the points where y was 0 and where y was 1. Then between 0 and 1, our graph is going to be above. And you have to be careful because if you make it above like way too much like that, it's no longer a function and it won't have the right shape. So sometimes it's hard to, you need to connect those 2 points. You need to show that it's slightly above, but you still have to make it a function. So you can't have it go back in time like that. So sometimes, as in this example, you just have to slightly make it above, almost exactly the same. And then after that, it's going to be below. Now, again, we're going to try to make a smooth curve through things. If I took this point, which was 5, the square root of 5 is 2.2, so it should, if I wanted another point, it should have gone through there as a way to see it. So now domain and range. Well, the domain of this one is a little bit different. It is when x is less than or equal to 1, or, and we use the word or instead of and, because in mathematical logical statements, and means it has to be true in both sections, and or means it can be true in one section or the other section. So it can be x is less than or equal to 1, or x is bigger than or equal to 5. That's how we would write that in set notation. In interval notation, we would go from negative infinity to 1, and then we use this symbol for the union, which is for or, and then it starts again at 5 and goes to infinity. Yes? No, when you get to write it, you get to choose. When it's given to you in a question, you have to know what it means in either way. And the range is still y is greater than or equal to 0. Something about the shape of this graph, as far as what will this graph look like in the end. Our original graph was a parabola, right? What happens when you square a parabola, square root of parabola? You end up getting x, which means that as you go on further and further, this graph will get closer and closer to look like a straight line. When we were just square rooting x, we knew that our shape looked like this. Now we're square rooting a parabola. It'll eventually, off to infinity, start getting more and more like a straight line. But if we have a parabola like the second one here, again, look for 0, look for 1. And since this has a maximum value, that too will be a good one to label. Can you see that the vertex of this parabola is at 9? Square root of 9, 3. So the places where it's between 0 and 1, our graph has to be slightly above that line. So this will be a little bit hard to do. And then afterwards, it's going to be below our red function. And this one will look like this. Our domain in set notation would look like this. In interval notation, it goes from negative 3 to 3. Our range in set notation would look like this. In interval notation, it goes from 0 to 3.
Sorry for the interruption. If we could please now have grade 12 students.
Question 8.